Chief, you about ready? You're set? Michelle? Okay. And Heidi, let me know when you're ready. Okay. All right, with that said, monthly meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
We've lost 8 firefighters to the line of duty and 11 police officers to the line of duty since our last board meeting. In addition, we lost one of our Arizona firefighters, Fire Chief Jeff Ventura. He died while working air attack in an airplane crash here, battling a wildfire in Cedar Basin as he was working for the U.S. Forest Service. Chief Ventura became the Northwest Fire District's first fire chief in November 1988 and served in that position for 24 years. During his time as fire chief, Ventura led the expansion of the district to serve the growing community. Ventura retired from the Northwest Fire District in 2012, yet continued his career in the fire service with Stockton, California Fire Department, and then right here with the Sedona Fire District. Ventura's passing leaves a tremendous void in the lives of his beloved family, friends, and the thousands of firefighters across the country he worked with. His professional accomplishments are far too many to be captured in a single document, and his personal impact on those who knew him is too immense to comprehend. For those of us fortunate enough to work with Jeff or Chief Pye, we will forever miss his warm smile, firm handshake, and endearing embrace he gave to those around him. Our thoughts and prayers are with Jeff's wife Donna and their 5 children.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we've got a few things to cover in today's meeting. First, right off the bat, we're going to turn it back to Chief Troutwine with the presentation of awards and some staff recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board, and good evening, everyone. So, it's my honor to recognize several of our employees for service awards for time here. The first one, he happens to be present, so we'll start with him for 10 years of service since July of 2021. Engineer Scaife, here he started our employment in July of 2011. He was hired as a firefighter EMT, and then in January 2021, recently promoted here as an engineer and EMT. Jonathan received a 2014 unit citation for the Slide Rock Fire Response, and also he's highly engaged in our peer sport, and he actually has developed curriculum and resilience training, and he goes all over the state, and he's in high demand, so we're very fortunate to have Engineer Scaife here with us, where we can benefit from that mental health encouragement and resilience training, so congratulations. And the next firefighter we'd like to honor is Jeremy Lilly. He began his employment also in 2011. He was hired as a firefighter EMT, and he became medic certified in 2012. Jeremy has accomplished quite a bit here in our district with the Community Service Award in 2012. Also, he's had several unit citations over 2013, 2014, 2015 for a Lee Mountain Rescue, Slide Rock Response, and also a rescue on 89A. He's had multiple letters of thanks and recognition from the community here for his volunteer work. Some of the community work that Jeremy does, he's the president of the Sedona Verde Valley Firefighters Charity. And he helped organize this charity. It was organized by operational firefighters looking to make a difference in their community. The organization has grown to over 100 contributing members. And it's 100% volunteer. The organization's been able to do this by assisting programs that help facilitate feeding the hungry, clothing the needy, and supporting youth education and athletic programs in the valley. Also, Jeremy's a member of our Honor Guard. Let's give Jeremy a hand for 10 years of service. And then finally, we're going to recognize Jamie Ingrail for 20 years of service here with the district. Now, we know when you hit 20 years here, you're actually eligible for retirement. Well, we're excited for Jamie, and he has expressed his desire to retire soon. He gave us a date. I'll share that with you when he retires. But we're very appreciative to his service and his commitment, his work here in this district, in this community. Jamie was hired as a firefighter EMT in 2001. He was promoted to engineer EMT in 2007. And then in 2021, he's listed as pending retirement. So I believe his date is, remember? September. Thank you, Chief Coyle. So special recognition, he has multiple letters of thanks for assisting with promotional assessment centers. Also, he was on the 2014 Engine Committee to purchase one of our new Pierce pumpers. And also, he works with a lot of different organizations in the community. So, we want to congratulate and thank Jamie, and we look forward to honoring him very soon here in his retirement.
Okay, well, thank you, Chief, and on behalf of the Fire Board, the three of you, a job well done, a career that's going by pretty doggone fast, and for one in particular, it's just about over. And it's gone by fast, and your retirement is the best. Both of us know that, so you might even be back on the board someday, you never know. But anyway, thank you guys for a job well done and well deserved. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to go into executive session momentarily, but before I do that, I want to recognize some people who are in the audience, because we're kind of getting back to normal with people in the audience, everybody back up to their seats and so on and so forth. So for those of us who have never met, starting on my right, going towards my left, is Ron Eland from Red Rock News, and he's the one that puts the favorable words out. So thank you for that. Had to grease the skids a little bit. So next to him is Scott Jablow. He is a council member and our vice mayor, Mr. Scott Jablow. Next to him is Karen Osborne. Is that correct? Did I get it right? Okay. And she is our city manager. Welcome. Glad to have you. And then we have Jeremy. All right, to you guys. Okay, with that said, we're going to go into executive session. I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible so as not to hold you folks up. So with that said, I need a vote to go into executive session for legal advice pursuant to ARS 38431.03A3 and possible instructions to legal counsel pursuant to ARS 38431.03A4 in regards to the Southwest Center Subdivision Declaration of Restrictions response to the City of Sedona. So, do I have a second?
So moved.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are now in executive session. Okay. Okay, we are back in public session, and as a result of executive sessions, we have a question for Ms. Osborne. If you would come up to the podium, please. Thank you. The information the chief gave to us that was discussed between the two of you, and as well as with Al, was very comprehensive. It clarified a lot of things for us, but we do have one question from Ms. Jablow, if you would, please.
Yes, we were informed that the housing would be used for workforce housing. Is this still in the plan of action?
Great question, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you, board members. Board Member Jablo, right now, we are anticipating pursuit of a workforce housing project. So we just announced one that will be happening on Sunset Drive. That was a partnership between the public sector and private sector to do 100% project with just workforce housing. In fact, not only is it deed-restricted subsidized workforce housing, but it will also require for application for someone to work full-time in the city. So we're looking at that same type of model for this parcel. We think, well, these two parcels lend themselves really well to multifamily, to workforce, but we do not have a developer. We have not made any site planning. Right now, we are really just in the preliminary stages to take the pulse of the 48 other members of this association that we just very recently learned about, to see if there is a willingness or an interest in changing those CCNRs that would allow us to even think about pursuing. So once we had that, that's the intent. Would we ever use those parcels for a market rate project? Doubtful, but I can't say unequivocally what it will be used for or if it will even be housing, but that is what we're pursuing right now.
Okay, anyone else? And Ms. Osborne, understanding that this is something that is out of the ordinary for us. Normally, we don't deal with homeowners associations and voting on that sort of thing. So, we did pay close attention to the letters and communications that came back and forth, and thank you for the clarified map that came across. The other one was a little bit tough to read. So with that said, I'll go ahead and make a motion, if you will. I move to vote in support of the city modifying the declaration of restrictions for the Southwest subdivision. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. So you got your one vote.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the city.
You got your first vote, yeah. There you go.
Now only 36 or so more to go. Thank
All right.
you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you for attending. Okay. With that said, we get into our regular business meeting, public forum. Do we have any speakers?
We have not received any requests.
Okay, it's good to see you, John. Our consent agenda consists of the June 15th, 2021 regular meeting minutes and the June 15th, 2021 executive session. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, it was seconded by Ms. Jablo. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is our financial report and updates from our Director of Finance, Gabe Boldra. Gabe?
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, give me 1 minute here to PowerPoint.
Okay.
And 10 more seconds, maybe 20. There we go. All right, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You have the June financial report in your packet. Obviously, June signifies the end of our fiscal year. So as we get into the report, I'm happy to report that we had a good year despite, some of the challenges in the world that we've dealt with over the last 12 months. And we're excited to get into the new fiscal year. So, as we transition here, okay. Starting off, tax levy revenue, we brought in $277,112, which was up $49,000 over what we projected for the month of June. When we get to year to date, you'll see that we're actually exceeded our budget on tax revenue year to date. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. Non-levy revenues were at $357,355. We were $100,000 over budget for the month on non-levy revenues. A couple things contributed to that. One, the biggest thing being wildland revenue really helped contribute to that variance.
as well as we did receive our first payment, of the Prop 207 money, which is the marijuana tax. If you remember, last month you adopted a pension policy that said we'd use that money for our pension obligations, whether they be our long-term liability or our ongoing pension debt, or pension obligations. So we brought in a whole $35,000 for that. So it's better than nothing. Not going to make a huge difference on our $22 million unfunded pension liability, but it's a start. And there's some information going around right now that it may have been miscalculated, some different interpretation in the calculation of what we received, that some ineligible entities were included in that. So hopefully when that gets refigured and they get it sorted out between the state treasurer's office, we may see a little bit more from that first payment. We won't get it again until December, but that is starting to come in, so that's good. Moving on to expenses for the month of June, you'll see for the large part, we were under budget across all major expense categories. Personnel was at $1,037,000, which was under budget by $44,000. Buildings and land at $28,479, which under budget by $4,600. Vehicles and equipment was over budget. That was our only category really of a significant variance at $72,458, which was $23,000 over budget. And that was due to some timing on some turnout purchases. So that's why we had that kind of monthly variance there on that vehicle and equipment purchase line item. Communication IT, pretty much right in budget there at $69,813, and managerial is under budget by $18,127. Looking at the entire fiscal year here, as it thinks about coming up, here we are. You'll see our total revenue is at $19,673,000. We are over budget by $878,000. A couple things I want to point out specifically to that revenue piece. One, property tax collection came in at $15,898,000, which is $116,000 over what we budgeted for the year. If you remember last year, though, we actually didn't collect all of our taxes last year. We were $189,000 short last year, so this overage of the $116 gets us pretty close to caught up for what we didn't collect last year. Looking at our non-levy revenues, you'll see we brought in $3.7 million, which is $761,000 over what we budgeted on non-levy revenue. Wildland, one of the biggest drivers of that at $1.7 million in total wildland revenue. I'm sorry, $1.16 million in total wildland revenue for the year. Ambulance revenue was at $1.7 million. We were $300,000 under what we budgeted. I do want to point out that this was anticipated. We knew with the transition on billing that there would be a shortfall on ambulance collections for the short interim period. I'm happy to report June, we were pretty much right on line with budget on our ambulance collections, and we will see that revenue come into this fiscal year as we get caught up in the new billing process. It fully ramps up, and we see the benefits of that transition. So despite a short-term cash flow impact, we still believe that the long-term benefit is going to be much greater for that. And again, that revenue is not lost. It's just a matter of timing before we collect it. Looking at our total expenses, you'll see total expenses are at $17,292,000. We are over budget for the year by $266,000. A couple things attributed to that variance. One, personnel is at $14,483,000 for the year, which was $181,000 over what we budgeted, and that was due to those wildland deployments. So while we were, $600,000 over in revenue, we're only $180,000 over in expenses. So definitely net positive for the district on that. You'll see buildings and land, vehicles and equipment, and communication IT all came in under budget. I will point out, especially with that large variance on communication and IT, that's one of the areas we focused on in this year's budget development, on changing some of the expectations on some of those budget categories to bring them more in line with what we've actually been experiencing from a cost standpoint on our IT department. And then finally, managerial expenses at $1,096,000. We were over budget by $272,000. If you remember, throughout the year, I mentioned that was due to a grant that was actually projected to occur in fiscal year 2020 that actually hit at the first part of fiscal year 21. So, we had the revenue to offset that expense, and so, from an impact standpoint to our budget, our operation, there was none. Mr. Chair.
Question for you, Gabe. The topic of carryover, what we carry over from the just recently ending fiscal year into the new fiscal year. And this slide that we're looking at shows, about $878,000 over budget.
Correct.
Is that the carryover, and where do you put it? How do you use it, and when do we get that replenished to ensure that that's still there?
Yeah, so obviously this year had a couple different things when it comes to carryover. One of the things we had in there was we budgeted for a certain amount of surplus based on needing monies to go to capital. And if you remember, as well as we wanted to also make sure we knew we were gonna see a surplus from our wildland deployments. And we also wanted to make sure, and we budgeted for that, because we didn't want our wildland revenue to have a effect on balancing our operating budget anywhere. So we did budget for those two surpluses, and then as you mentioned, we outperformed even those projections and those numbers. We were projected to have a surplus of $1.76 million, and we had a surplus of $2.3 million. Now, obviously, there was some capital purchases in there, and other things that ate up some of that cash, some retirement of debt. But our total cash on hand actually went up $1,368,000 year over year. So that is essentially that 1.3, almost 1.4 million is our surplus. Some of those monies, the amount that's earmarked, will go to capital as we close out the books and reconcile all of our capital purchases with our operating purchases and make that cash transfer to our capital fund. The rest will actually live within our general fund. And that gives us that unrestricted fund balance that we've talked about over the years, that we wanted to have at a healthy balance to cover kind of those unexpected things. And for example, when things carry over, there's some projects right now that have been started last fiscal year, I have to say last fiscal year now, that the money's gonna need to be paid this fiscal year. And so that's why that money's gonna sit there in that general fund as those projects close out, and then we use those funds to cover those costs.
Okay. And as you and the fire chief discuss our unfunded liability accounts, such as the pension and, as an example, is what we're contributing to that healthy enough, or do we need to increase that based on what we have on hand? And if so, when might we be considering that?
So right now, we do contribute to our unfunded liability based on I'll double check this, but I believe we're contributing based on a 30-year amortization of that unfunded liability. So that's what we're doing. We're essentially making the minimum payment on our debt right now.
Right.
Put it in kind of simple terms. We believe, and Chief and I have talked about it briefly, is we would like to see some more positive stabilization from public safety before we start taking money out of the district accounts and applying a higher percentage of our dollars to that unfunded liability. Over the last couple of years, there's been significant changes at public safety, and we believe we're going to continue to see that stabilization, so we can then start taking the money that's currently sitting in the district's accounts and start using it to pay down that unfunded liability.
Okay. Thank you. Any other further questions?
No.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Rest is yours.
All right. Percentage of expenses, waiting. There it is. So end of the year, obviously, as always, personnel are highest at 84%. Operations were at 7, managerial at 5, and communications at 4. And really, the only reason we saw kind of that higher percentage of personnel is twofold. One, obviously, we had more wildland this year, which drove up our personnel costs. But also, we're still really in a COVID year where we didn't incur a lot of other operational expenses, travel, training expenses. And so that lowers our total expense or our total dollars going to other things. And so that's why we see that personnel go a little higher than that 81%, nationwide average. But so I think we're still in a good position when it comes to that. If If you'll remember, usually when we start off the first part of the fiscal year, we're in the higher 80s because we're not expending any money on anything other than staffing personnel. And it's also the big first part of the wildland season as well, where we're heavily involved. And then finally, year over year, ended with 12.6 million total cash on hand compared to 11.2 million last year. Our other assets increased from 20.9 to 21.4 million, and total liabilities decreased from 29.5 to 29.0. So a couple things will change as we go through finalizing and closing the books. We're going to record our annual depreciation, which will lower those other assets numbers. And then on our liabilities, once we get the new actuarial report for the June 30th, 2021 pension, we'll update those numbers, and that will reflect our current liability there as of June 30th. So I anticipate, we've already started audit prep internally, and anticipate probably November, December time period where we have kind of those finalized numbers with everything recorded. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any additional questions the board may have.
Any further questions? Okay. With that said, thank you, Gabe. That was
Thank you.
good report. With that said, I move to approve the June 2021 financial report. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The finance report for June 2021 is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is our fire chief's monthly report. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board, and good evening, everyone. Looking at our chief's report for this month, you can see, in terms of our 2021 monthly incident summary, June is a very, very busy month. In fact, it started incredibly busy, and one thing that slowed it a bit, mid-June, was the closure of the National Forest. So this number reflects really significantly how busy it was this month, and you can see our upward trend again as things open and become a little more active in our district. You can look at the year-to-date totals. We're definitely out more than last year. And it's significant, again, look at that rescue number. So a lot of rescues, a lot of trail rescues. People are out and about. When we go to our last slide here on the responses by station, it's pretty consistent month to month where the calls are and how many. So, having said that, to kick us off, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Administrative Services, Heidi Robinson, for administration.
So thank you, members of the board, chairman. For our updates, news and events, we saw a couple of you at the AFTA conference, so it was the first live Arizona Fire Chiefs and Fire District Association meeting and conference down in Phoenix. It was good to collaborate and get the group together. Some good training. The board chairman did go through his mandated coursework. We also did send Division Chief Mizoulis through his mandatory coursework, and which is accomplished, which is really great. Kind of a step ahead for his acting chief duties sometimes when the fire chief and the assistant chief are both out of district. Our annual report comes up later in our presentation today as its own agenda item, but we do want to address that we did accomplish that, and that was a feat. We would congratulate Carrie Tarver, but she is on vacation, well-deserved, after completing such a report. At this time, we usually will do our surplus spending. We've been doing that through this last year for the surplus spending of the fiscal year 20 funds that have been obligated and approved by the board. We don't have an update to it because we're just getting out the final numbers. Finance Director Boldra did address some of those things that we have, due to mechanics and supplies and delivery, we have some of those pieces that are not yet fully invoiced and paid, so we want to see how much of that we can get accomplished in this last month, and then we'll have a full report in our August meeting to kind of show how our projects went, what's still pending, what we've tabled, and what we've been able to complete. So thank you again so much for approving those funds, and we'll get that update for you then. We have posted our RFP, a request for proposal for our telecom assessment. We've been talking about that throughout the month. We finished the document, we posted it on July 1. There is a July 29th due date for proposals. We have received inquiries from several firms that we direct sent the posting to, published on our website, and we've had some information that other firms have seen it posted in public forums, and so we anticipate getting a good number of responses so that we can make an informed decision. And of course, we'll update you in August as we go through that process and see where we are. For staffing updates, the firefighter recruitment, we've got background checks have come in, and we're going through that data, presenting that to the fire chief in case there's any information that needs to be considered before moving forward with that hiring process and an offer. We're getting geared up to get them fitted for their gear in anticipation for their successful onboarding process. Michelle is grinning. As I understand, they may have come today for that fitting, so that is exciting news. So we're getting ourselves all ready, trying to get ahead of the curve and get these guys ready for an assessment center, which I believe is scheduled for September if all goes well. Internal postings, we had 2 internal postings that came out this month. One is for our fire inspector position for our CRR department, of course. That's an internal hire only, and we do have at least 1 applicant, so we're very thrilled to go through that process. Update also will be pending. And then the other one is the wildland position, wildland coordinator. Yes, is that the right title for it? I don't know. Also internal. Very excited to get that one filled as well. We'll keep updating you as we get more pieces. Besides those things, we've finished up our year end, and that's the bulk of our month activities. But we will do our mental health moment, just how I close out my section, and we're going to jump ahead a month. August is National Grief Awareness Month, but in light of the memorial that some of us attended today, and that many of you are aware of, I did go ahead and put it in as our mental health moment for the day is stages of grief and grief awareness, that everyone processes grief differently. Some people stay active, some people withdraw, some people like to talk about it, others don't want to mention it. And so just being aware in this time of need for, in particular, Arizona Fire Service, to ask how someone is processing and make sure to let them know that you're willing to listen and to support in any way you can. We do have our new health plan and our new employee assistance program, and they have a large section available online, free of charge, for our personnel to access that will help them through stages of grief. So we're encouraging our staff to reach out, and we'll reach out board members also as well. If you have any questions or needs, we're here to help you. So with that concludes my presentation, and I will answer any questions.
Any questions? The RFP, is there a due date on that? Or?
The due date for it to be turned in is 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 29th.
Okay, July 29th. And as far as the IT job description or process, I know we kind of went back to the drawing board on that. Where are we at on that?
I will allow Chief Troutwine to address.
Yes, thank you. So, we're in, right now, looking at our executive positions and updating the job descriptions with those. We noted a couple of them aren't very well developed as the district transitioned or had not been looked at in a while. So we're just getting to the completed product on that. And the phase 2, looking at our job descriptions, updating is going to go over to the IT division. And we'll look at those and make sure they're good and clean. We've done some work internally. We've contracted an outside vendor for those 2 phases. Done some work internally on the CRR as we were looking to fill that fire inspector position. So with ITT, once we get those clean job descriptions, then we're going to re-engage in a process. And part of it in parallel is this whole infrastructure assessment. You know, do we have enough staff? You know, have we given them the correct responsibilities? Those types of things that we're are in part of that scope. So we're hoping is that an IT assessment comes through and we get some of that information, to get in our phase 2 of doing our classification updates, job description updates for the IT division specific, then it'll become very clear what the need is for that position and how we can go about it. We tried a couple times and didn't turn out like we anticipated, so we're gonna re-engage. But it's kind of like, you try the first couple times to do a good job, and if it doesn't happen, the third time, you kind of call the Air Force, the Army, the Marines, everybody, not just a little Navy SEAL team. So we're gonna regroup, and we're really excited about shoring up that division and getting it, we're gonna get support for those hardworking employees, really.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Heidi, for your report. Chief?
Thank you, Heidi. So we'll go to Operations Assistant Chief Jason Coyle.
Hey, good evening. This is a bummer because I haven't figured out the glasses thing yet, and I can't read the sign up there with them on. And I can't really read my paper with them off, so, yeah, thank you. Anyhow, we'll start with COVID-19. The last couple of briefings that I've given have been positive in this respect for Arizona. That's not necessarily the case right now. Arizona's infection rate is at 1.24, so that means for every one person who's infected, they're getting 1.25 people infected. Yavapai County is actually leading the state with the highest infection rate of 1.41. So that means for every one person, they're infecting 1.41 people. Coconino County is the 11th county at 1.07, so they're making very slow gains in the wrong direction. You know, there's some pretty interesting information and then a lot of disinformation, I shouldn't say disinformation, misinformation out about the vaccines and the response to the different variants that are out there. But I think that the one data point that kind of paints the picture the most is that of the people hospitalized with COVID-19, so they have moderate or severe illness, 97 to 99% over the last 2 months, and it varies a little bit by region in the United States, have been unvaccinated. So, you know, the vaccines work. You'll hear like on the news where people, maybe in the Olympics, have said that somebody tested positive. It's important for everybody to remember a reminder I sent out to the operations crew today that the intent of the vaccines is to prevent you from getting moderate or severe illness. It is not to prevent infection. It's called sterilizing immunity. There's not very many vaccines that actually accomplish that. So, you know, just something for us to keep in mind as we're moving forward. Something else that's going on, I'm sure you've heard about in the news, is the Delta variant. So, first thing is when we have these new variants, a variant can become more prevalent just because the virus is more fit. It either lives longer, maybe it makes you cough more, maybe it stays in your upper respiratory area longer before moving down to your lungs, so when you sneeze, you tend to project it more, so more people get sick. So a variant of a virus becoming more prevalent in the population does not mean that it has a higher mortality rate. It just means that it's more fit, they call it. It's the fitness of the virus. So its transmissibility, how long it lives on surface, a lot of it. But what it does mean is it gets around more if it's a more fit virus. And so, you know, one of the examples they had that the CDC put out in their MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, pretty sexy name for a report, was a outbreak that was at a gymnastics facility, and they basically genotyped all the viruses to see how much that Delta variant was prevalent. And what they found in this assessment was that the household attack rate, so the attack rate is basically just the percent of an at-risk population that get it. So if everybody in here was an at-risk population and 5 out of 10 people got it, that would be a 50% attack rate. So the Delta variant, when in household transmission, has a 53% attack rate. All the other previous variants had a 17% attack rate cumulatively. So that right there, that's the big problem, and that's a big problem with behaviors. You could be behaving the same way that you had been for the previous months, and if you're exposed to the same type of people, the same amount of virus, you're 2.5 times more likely to actually get infected now with this new variant, which is now, they estimate about 83% of the COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus that's circulating in the United States is this Delta variant because it's more fit. It's outcompeted against all the other variants. So, what does that mean? It's prompted some of the changes on wildland fires. We expect for the next couple of days that we'll be rolling back actually on incidents to the standards that we had in place in 2020, which is full mask on incidents, social distancing, the whole 9-yard, eating separately, all that. And the reasons for that are twofold. One is the demographic that participates in wildland fires, especially on the contract resource side, which is real prevalent in the northern part of the United States, appears to be less prone to get vaccinated. And the other thing is that there's such a critical shortage of resources right now. Some of the things we did last year were early on in the season where we take a hotshot crew out because they had somebody that tested positive. Once we isolate the rest of them to make sure it didn't spread, that's going to have a much more significant impact on our ability to suppress these large fires. So we expect to see that changing. What that means right now for the Sedona Fire District is that we go out on those fires, and of course guys are expected to comply. But in-house, what it's been is we just reinforced what our standards are right now, which is aligning with the current CDC guidance. And that's just making sure that people that aren't vaccinated remain masked when they're indoors, stay separate when they're eating, that kind of thing. Nobody has to get vaccinated, but there is a high expectation that people follow the standard for their mask use and everything if they've chosen not to. So yeah, so we'll see the next month to 2 months is going to kind of tell whether this is just a little blip or if we continue to trend in the wrong direction. That's the COVID update in sort of a nutshell. If you have any questions, I have there again.
Yeah, Chief, as first responders, and now with this variant that's out that is more fit, to me, it's more important now than ever that our members that are the first responders receive the vaccination. Yet, we don't have anywhere near 100%, and we may never get to 100% of the membership. Where are we right now?
I don't know. Chief Mazulis is the keeper of those numbers. I'm sure we're not at 100%. And we continue to try to help provide everybody with the best information possible to be able to make that decision. But, yeah, I agree. It would be great if we did, just because, me personally, I think it would allow them to keep themselves safer and keep their family safer as they're the potential of being exposed to a variant that they're more likely to contract, and they go home to their under 12 child that maybe couldn't get vaccinated. But all we can do right now is try to get the best information out. And that was part of what my effort today was internally with the operations group and with the BCs, was just kind of reminding people. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the wildland fire situation was significant events. So, as the chief said, the UTV rollovers, I'm sure you could put a pin in the amount when the forest closed to when they opened up again as far as our UTV rollovers. But there was, one of them was significant on July 8th. And what's kind of interesting about that call is that we had an aircraft that came into the scene, sat down as it was lifting off, and made a noise to the aircraft. Helicopters don't normally make. Sat back down. Another aircraft and got the patient safely transported. And I followed up with the Air Methods, who's the people that run their aircraft, and I was really impressed with how serious they took this event, which sounds like it was just maybe a loose door panel or something and some hinges, but they had this happen once before. At that time, they replaced the entire transmission, driveline, everything in the aircraft to the tune of $1 million. They were very forthcoming with the information they got off of the computers, make sure that it wasn't over-torqued, it didn't have a compressor stall, some major event, and then walked us through what all they were doing. So, that was just, it gave me more confidence in us operating around those aircraft to know that when this noise, it didn't affect its performance, but, since they weren't certain what they did, they decided to shut the aircraft down. What happened the first time, they took such extreme measures to make sure that all the stuff that could cause a catastrophic failure was addressed. And then the second time when it happened, they're continuing to search that out and ensuring that they get to the bottom of it. So what ended up being certainly problematic for the battalion chief that was running that call. And fortunately, I don't think it impacted patient outcome at all. But it turned into be a really good example of how that they were taking the safety of their crew and those of us working around it very seriously. We had a lot of heat-related injuries. It's kind of hard to remember now that it's so nice out, but it was a couple weeks ago when we were breaking records, and so that was another part of our major incident response with people on wildland fires from at the last board meeting, we're still engaged in the Raphael and the Backbone fires. Since then, we've got one person that's up on the Bootleg fire, serving an overhead position in Southern Oregon, and, other than that, we have everybody back in-house, and we expect that there's gonna be another push as, there's been a lot of resource requests for people, for us to send resources up further north, but until we get, these new hires on board, get our staffing up where it belongs, we're being very conservative about that, is to make sure that we're taking care of the home base first. You know, a couple other interesting things is we have been coordinating with CCSO SAR, their search and rescue, to make sure that as we do get into this you know, really good monsoonal flow, not good for Heidi's neighborhood specifically, but it's been good for everybody else, that we're making sure that we're coordinating and using the right frequencies, understand what their officers are trained to do. So when we, swiftwater calls are very labor intensive, so we press them into service to assist, that everybody's got a good combo, and that we're making sure that we're not asking somebody to do something that is beyond their scope. So that outreach was effective and it was positive. I also met with flag staff, with the city flag staff's fire leadership last week, and we just made sure that we had a clear understanding of how if they requested our support for some of the flooding they've experienced off of the museum fire scar and some based on just heavy localized rain, that we would have a way to coordinate our efforts and make sure that there's, tracking from point to point with that. That's been the excitement for the resources and everything that's been going on as far as incident response. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the wildland season.
None for me.
So in Arizona, New Mexico, it's green. The Prescott just came out of full restrictions for the forest, for all the restrictions for the forest. I'll let John talk about the other ones, because I'll mess it up. But, the monsoons are in full swing. We're expecting to have increased monsoonal flow even over this weekend. The Four Corners high setup, which a traditional monsoon, which we haven't seen in the last 2 years, seems to be here, knock on wood. It looks like, judging by there's a radar product that estimates rainfall over a period of time based on the radar return on water that's falling from the clouds. And, our topography is not perfect, but it looks like, we have 1 to 3 inches of rain across our entire district over the last week. So that's really good to see. On the other hand, as far as wildland fire outlook, Northern California, the Pacific Northwest, Great Basin, and Northern Rockies have a ton of new fires, more fires, I think, at the same time than, I can remember in the last 20 years. And I was on a call with Northern California's incident meteorologists, and they're talking about where their fuels were, and they're about 6 weeks ahead in dryness and the criticality of their fuel conditions. So, why that matters, and luckily I'm really glad we're out of it now, is that, there's that expectation that when Northern California comes into play, and for those of you who work in Southern California, then it kind of moves down in October, down into Southern California. Northern Rockies normally comes in late August-ish, and then the Pacific Northwest lights off earlier. Well, now all of them, and a little bit of the Great Basin, are all going on at once. So that's just one of those things that's driving the competition for resources. It's not like if you look back at the year, it's just the number of fires, but it's that everyone is seeing critical fire behavior at the same time. And our system's just not designed to have enough resources to spread over that big of an area. So we'll see what the outcome is. Again, I'm glad we're wet. Moving on to the GIS updates. So, Emily, big lift, that has been, I'd say it's about 50% accomplished, and there's been a lot of staff support as we're getting this done too, is new map books. So it's the first time in, probably 10 years that we've actually done a full start to finish revamp of the entire map book. And that is, they're done. It's just a matter of getting them put into their sheet protectors and getting them out, and then also working on doing the quick look map books. So the map books, for those of you that aren't aware, show a box that is, may cover like, say, 5 or 6 streets by 5 or 6 streets. But in there, sometimes there's places like the Summit or the Sedona Shadows, where there's a lot, at one address, there's a bunch of different homes. And so these quick look map books have those high density occupancy areas, or maybe a place where there's like a high life safety risk, or there's some other complexity there. It could be the Blocky Pocky shops have one, where it's a blow up of just that area so they can see where all the different suites are. to help them to plan their response. And so that's what Emily's working on right now, is to redo those and then get those in the book. So I suspect by next board meeting, we should have some pretty sexy map books to show y'all. Another thing, a project that she's been working on, it just kind of shows some of the diversity of Emily's skill set, is that so a lot of the products that she uses and that are made by Esri, the company that makes the GIS products, are made for field data collection. So we pressed her into service on some different things, from a QR code to track every time the BC runs out of ambulances. And so that's a QR code in his vehicle, you click on that and fill out the form. So he quickly remember to do it at the time, and we can start getting trends of when we've gone all the way down to zero. So at the end of the year, we can report out on that and say, hey, we don't have to be intuitive about it, we don't have to make an estimation. We can say, yeah, we logged 71 times that we had all of our ambulances committed at once, and that can help drive decisions on where staffing of those, or whether we should get more ambulances, that kind of stuff. So something else she's doing is that with the, with the drug box tracking, is she's creating an app so that they can remotely, so when they're out on fires, they can do all their checks and everything to make sure that we're compliant with not only our base hospital, but with DEA, since we carry controlled substances, in a way that makes it easier for the crews in the field to be able to gather that data. So she's also going to be working over the next month on additional training to do to better utilize remote imagery. So that will allow her to use aerial photographs, vegetation layers, and everything like that to help us as we're starting to look at some of our, defining our wildfire risk and where the areas of the highest threat are within the community. Moving on to the telecom updates. Right now, I got to give a big shout out to Bob Motes on Friday, which happened to be his daughter's 18th birthday. There's a problem with the dispatch center, that's channel 1, which is where we receive our not only our alerting, but also where they give the information for the call. So we get a little bit of information on our pagers, but it'll say something like, individual fell at the, and that's about all the characters that it fits. So that report that they give, and then that follow-up that's given after they finish going through their Pro QA and everything, is really key to make sure that we have an effective response. Well, because of an issue that they had, it wasn't working. We couldn't use channel 1 at all, so we were dependent on cell phones and just that pager data that came over. So Bob went down there and worked on their side of the system at their request, and had us back up by 2100, identified the problem, and got it fixed. So, it was certainly something that was critical to our response, and something that had to be taken care of right away, but it did have some, impact. Of course, it happened on a day when he had, poor life event for his daughter, and really appreciate him going down and taking care of that. We're also working on the SPD project, and that's something that's moving forward, telecom, with the September 1st go live date for them. So that's a project that we committed to do some years ago with Sedona PD. It also complements our radio system, and it prevents us from having frequencies that interfere. So there's a reason for us as well to make sure that we're aligning, that we're doing work that aligns with the way our system is set up, so it does not create any future interference. That's ongoing, and also it sounds like Bob finished addressing the microwave issue. 5 different dishes. There's communications problems. There's software problems that are really complex. Hard for me to explain, but if you said it was complex, that's a new level of complexity for me. So anyhow, it looks like that's up and running, and fortunately, when that was occurring, there was no loss of service to the district, so he was able to roll those things back and forth. So when it comes to that technical field stuff, that's certainly one of the areas that we're fortunate to have a lot of skill sets. And then lastly, there's working on identifying a new phone system. Thanks to Heidi and other people in administration, they provide a list of what the tools for that new phone system should do. Some of them were highlighted on this last fire incident, being able to have people call, and if we update a phone system to say, hey, that you want Raphael fire evacuation information, press this, so make sure that we can port it out to, maybe it's the answering center, if there's an incident management team set up or whatever, chain those messages quickly. And so all that end user functionality has been identified, so that when we get a phone system, we don't get a phone system that's just technically efficient, but one that actually meets the needs of the people that are using the phone system all the time. So, and through that, we'll gain efficiencies. That is the end of my report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, unfortunately, I've got one. You mentioned during a given time period, there were 71 times that we were totally out of EMT resources or rescues. Is that correct?
So, I didn't say that, well, but I was giving you an example.
Oh.
I don't know how many times it is, but what we were doing before is we would have staffing meetings, we talk about issues that the battalion chiefs were facing, and I said, yeah, I'm really worried, because the other day, we got all the way down to 0 ambulances, and we had to call one in from Cottonwood, and unfortunately, somebody came back in service, or we had an extra person from this station, we were able to staff up a backup ambulance. And so instead of us just, you're kind of going, yeah, it seems like it's happening a lot, they are tracking it every single time it happens in real time. So, in near real time, as soon as it's done, there's a, except the QR code, those little square boxy deals that looks kind of like a funny barcode, but they can just take a picture of that with the phone that they're issued, battalion chief phone, and it'll take them right to this short form that they fill out, and they talk about the date, the time, it's auto populated, and that they ran out of ambulances. And all that's being stored then, and in our ArcGIS account, and then Emily can pull that data down and tell us like, hey, in the last 6 months, you know, the ambulance exception form was used 17 times or 71 times, like I said. We don't know how many times yet, but it's something we're doing to make sure that we're providing accurate data that paints a clear picture of what the response challenges we face when it comes specifically to running out of ambulances.
I think the thing that concerns me with that is the fact that do we have the ability, along with this tracking information, of how many calls are at risk of not receiving any once we're out, any resources? In other words, if we pick 71, if we were out of, we identified 71 times, and during that time, we could not assign an ambulance to that. You know, how many came up in that interim that we were out of? And I think that's critical.
If I understand the question correctly, how many times have we has service suffered because we ran out of ambulances, our deliveries? To my knowledge, it has not. It's not like we haven't been able to get ALS care to someone, or that there's been a delay in getting an ambulance there to transport that has had a negative impact on service. It's just that we don't know how many times we've got right there on that edge, on that, because obviously we don't want to live there very much.
You're right.
So if we're finding out that we're getting there a lot, then it's going to prompt us to have more serious conversations about how we allocate resources.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Chief Coyle. CRR, Division Chief Davis.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, board members and Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have anything as exciting to talk about as helicopters and rollovers and fire engines, so I'll just stick to my stuff. Chief Coyle alluded to the burn restrictions being lifted. Last week, Coconino County, Coconino National Forest, Sedona Fire District, we all came out of burn restrictions together. Yavapai County elected to stay in, as of, I believe, Monday morning, they dropped down to stage 1 fire restrictions. For them, that's a sound decision. You know, as you know, it's a large county, much of it at much lower elevations down towards the valley, Black Canyon City. So they still have some areas where they're facing some issues. Up at our elevation in our area, those have passed. The Prescott National Forest is coming out of fire restrictions, I believe, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So, as Chief Coyle mentioned, we are definitely heading in the right direction, and the moisture in the air is very welcome. Back to CRR, we had a fairly typical month. One of the big things, and a question that I still haven't had answered yet, is the engine company inspections. Those dropped off significantly. Captain Wassel has been on vacation for a couple of weeks, so we haven't had a chance to catch up and figure out what happened there, whether it was a reporting issue or exactly what the issue is. But the engine company inspections are down significantly. Plan reviews, I believe last month, if I remember correctly, we had 82 plan reviews, and at the time I mentioned how that was amazing and it shattered the previous record by 10 or 12 plans reviews at the time, and now, looking back, the last month we had 93. It just seems to be going crazy. Lots of construction projects, and I'm hoping the level of offer slows down, because it's a hard pace to keep up. Notable events, we had a small wildland fire out off of Sunset Lane in the Chavez Ranch area. That turned out to be, I think it was around 10 acres or so. That ended up in the U.S. Forest Service area, and they did the fire investigation on that. I did not hear a final result on what they came up with on their investigation. Then, of course, we had the Raphael fire, which was outside of our district, but it covered us with a lot of smoke, ash in some places, and there was quite the community was quite concerned about it. Once the Type 1 incident management team came in and managed the fire, the information sharing got much better. But, it takes time to get those things up and running. That's understandable. It takes a few days to get all of that apparatus in place and start getting that information out. Once that happened, we, of course, were pushing out their information on Facebook, Nextdoor, all of the social media that we have available to us. All of the office staff was aware of it, so there was a lot of phone calls coming in. And like I said, once that information got out, it certainly helped calm the citizens and help ease their mind. My safety message this month is slips, trips, and falls in the home. Over half of all over half of all falls that cause injury happen in the home. I'm becoming aware of it as we age. Our balance isn't what it used to be. Our eyesight, I didn't used to have to wear glasses, isn't what it used to be. So there are some things that you can do in your home to help prevent falls. Number one, clear the clutter. If you've got clutter on the floors, whether that's power cords, dog bowls, fans, whatever, keep the clutter out of your way. Use night lights. If you need rails in your shower or bathroom, have them installed where you need them. They can help tremendously cut down on the number of falls. Use non-skid mats in your bathtubs and showers. Throw rugs. Throw rugs can be a huge issue for fall injuries, especially ones that are not that don't lay flat or where the corners come up. If you're going to use throw rugs, make sure you put some adhesive on them to hold them down or remove them. One of the other things that I find myself doing all the time, I go to get something and it's up on the shelf, and I get the ladder out, I grab it, and then I put it back, and then a week later I'm doing the same thing, and put stuff where you use it. Sometimes we don't think about that, and we put stuff back where it goes, and then we find ourselves using it over and over. So when you find those items that you use a lot, put them down where they're easy to get. Another thing that can prevent falls is to avoid slippers or going barefoot. Wear sturdy shoes when you can. That will help give you better footing and help eliminate falls. That is the end of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think we're good with that. Very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you, Chief Davis. Chief Mazulis is actually on a very well-deserved vacation with his family, so I'm gonna make a few comments under his division. Under our EMS activities, we have solicited to send 2 firefighters through paramedic school, so we're getting that lined up. We typically allow for about 2 in our budget annually to make sure we keep up with our numbers of staffing, so our ambos and our engines are adequately staffed so we can continue to provide advanced life support on all our apparatus. Our fleet, we still are finishing off the UTV projects. The 2 projects have, the delivery of them is slowed only really because of the global material and and vehicle slowdowns because of COVID and the impact of that. So, we're excited, those are still en route, we're gonna get those projects finished off, we're gonna get them delivered, we'll get our firefighter, we'll outfit them with equipment, get our firefighters trained, and we'll see those out in the trail. And also on our wildland deployments, maybe later this season, you can see in terms of our training hours, we're continuing to train quite aggressively, and, that's really how we keep focused and mission-centric, and how we're accomplishing everything out there in the field to get done what needs to be done in this community and provide for that safety. We have a new helicopter rescue technician, procedure that we have, formally adopted, which is, I think, a really good thing. As we probably have let you know in the past, or Chief Cole's let you know in the past, we have, 2 HRT, personnel per shift, so a total of 6, and they do extensive training with DPS and helicopters so that they can operate safely when we have to do a rescue with that helicopter at a short haul. And as part of that, our operational staff went back and looked, and we were able to adopt a policy to continue that high standard of training and safety for those individuals. It's very specific training. It's very dangerous, working directly under a helicopter in an environment which there could be unanticipated variables. It's one thing a helicopter coming to a known airport that pilot flies to in and out all day. It's another thing when we say we're gonna give you a coordinate, you're gonna fly up to the mountain and go down in a canyon, and one of our firefighters is gonna hang from under you and rescue somebody. Much different environment. So, as Chief Cole talked about the air ambulance we're using, and I think because those 911 responses take that airship into unknown environment, there's a lot of weight on that pilot, but we try to put safety thresholds in that, and this, I wanted to point out, is an exact reason why we did that procedure more formally. We did have National Stand Down Week in this June. It's typically in June, where all the fire agencies across the country take a moment to evaluate their mental status, really, in terms of safety and how we approach the job. Sometimes we get so aggressive, we take a little more risk than we should, so it's important to take a moment to pause, think about our risk management profiles, and, how we're gonna operate safely out there in these environments. Also, listen, another shout out to Carrie again. It's crazy that we get to shout out for her while she is on vacation, right? I mean, what's going on here, Carrie? I think she's our name in the report several times and said, ooh, I don't want that kind of public appreciation. Well, too bad, we're going on record. She completed her bachelor's degree, which is a huge feat. I mean, for anyone, but on top of that, the children that they're raising, her and her husband are raising at home, as you know, Captain Tarver, her raising Captain Tarver, I think he's still, he's improving, but anyway, great shout out to her on that. And I know we're coming up, you have in your pack, that annual report that Heidi brought up earlier, man, fantastic job on that too, so a shout out there. Any questions for EMS training fleet?
No, sir.
Very good, then to finish the chief's report, the last item on the agenda tonight is the strategic plan. We have that loaded in your packet, that update, so we're gonna go and look at that, which, we're excited for that. Station 4 construction, we're approaching to initiate a phase 1 feasibility, which is a high-level look at our property up there, what we might do, and we're trying again to line up with, some hopefully lowering construction costs and more readily available materials while we'll start to walk Station 4 down. You can see on purchase orders, we had several, between $10,000 and $50,000 power lift, annual drug box, and also Station 4 flooring. And then, again, you can see we had quite an increase in our public outreach and communication. Remember, the Raphael fire's close, the Backbone fire's close. The Cornville fire was very dynamic, close, shorter, the forest initiated some very aggressive fire suppression and really kept that in check. So I think that always raises eyebrows, and so they're gonna wanna know what we think and say about it when we get those kinds of smoke conditions around us. So, you can see we had quite a big public outreach and communication with our social media. And then, the last two things on the item there is don't forget to read that correspondence. Again, to me, it's a litmus test of how we're doing out in the community. And we get excellent support in this community. We have people that go out of their way to put those thank you notes in letters, and we appreciate that. It really, it means a lot to us to get that kind of input. And then you can see we had a couple, Diana Thomas gave a $50 donation, and then also Pine Flats property owners gave a $400 donation. I think their letter's in there. They're always appreciative up at Oak Creek Canyon, of us providing our cleanup weekend and week, and, they always partake in that. And they take serious their preparation of their property up in the canyon, so very nice, appreciation there. So that would conclude comments on the fire chief's report. Is there any questions?
None for you, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good comprehensive report. Next up on the agenda, we have the discussion and presentation of the 2020 annual report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Board. So I'm hoping that as you reviewed your package, you had the chance to carefully go through that report. Again, Carrie Tarver did an excellent job as she does putting that together. You know, staff went through it and edits and input and all that, and some of these type of products for me as the fire chief, I always it's kind of like, you know, when everyone's left the scene, you're the last one out. So just kind of document, I feel that way as the fire chief. I got in my office, got my coffee, and said, I'm gonna do the final read on this, give the final approval. And so I went head to toe. I actually read every single word. And you know, when I finished, I had one thought, wow, I really want to work for that organization. Then it dawned on me, as I took a couple more sips of coffee, I do work for that organization. So I'm hoping we're not going to go line by line. It's in your packet. We do post it for internal and also on our website, so it's access to the public. Also, for the boards, if you would like an actual printed copy, we can do that too. Feel like that electronic access is really kind of a good use of resource, and it makes it available. But read the report, go through it. First, thank you to the board for the support you give the Sedona Fire District to accomplish what we did. Second, thank you to staff, because it really highlighted a lot of hard work by staff. And third, thank you to the firefighters. It really highlights a lot of hard work by the firefighters. This, you know, there's over 30,000 fire agencies in the United States. Sounds staggering, but I'm going to guarantee that in that top percentage of what those fire agents are doing and accomplishes, we're up there towards the top. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Won't give you a percentage. Maybe someday I'll get Chief Coyle to do the analysis on it, because he's way better at that than me. But again, really impressive, the accomplishment of the employees here, the firefighters, the staff. And, you know, for me, my goal is to support them and that work, and I know that's your goal. So thank you for partnering with me to do that. And then please read it and take the time to be proud of yourself to be a part of this, because, man, I'll shop that report anywhere, you know, to any agency across the country. So are there any questions on it, having gone through, or anything anyone saw?
I have one question. On the page, it was a photograph about, it had, here we go, on page 14. It had a firefighter lying on the ground with equipment around him.
Yeah.
What was the equipment for? It seems like is it specific, or is,
Wildland.
Yes.
okay.
So that really is a great pictorial representation of what the firefighters use when they're on a wildland deployment. So,
Paper doll.
I'm sorry, sir?
It's kind of like the old-fashioned paper doll.
Yes, yes, and he's actually a real-life firefighter, not a paper doll, but, so you can see from the boots, the specific type of pants and long-sleeve shirt, the pack that has a fire shelter in that, which, you know, in an emergency, you might have to deploy that, and also various other equipment and that's used out in the line. and the lighter weight helmet than a structural helmet. Typically, a structural helmet, you're gonna stay in that less time in a structure fire than you would, on a wildland deployment. You might be out in the line for a lot more hours. And then you can see the Pulaski, you can see, it looks like a McLeod, is that correct? Fire shovel and McLeod, and then those overnight packs and stuff. That firefighter right there, I believe it was Cave? Yeah. He's ready to go. We could put him on a Type 6, Type 3, we could put him on anything and say, go to California for 2 weeks. Write us how well it went. He's ready to go. Yeah, he needs a little food and water, but don't worry, we can figure out that. But anyway, that's a good question, but hopefully that gives you a good picture of what our firefighters, have to use out there in that wildland environment.
Just one more question, if I may. The tent pack that you were talking about, first they have to go in during a fire. How many times may that be reused?
It's a one-time use.
It is.
So annually, our firefighters, we call it red card qualification. So at their rank and the specific responsibilities they have doing what they do, they have to get qualified, which is a amount of training and education. So, part of that annual qualification is what we call a refresher class, a fire safety refresher class, RT-130. So everybody in the fire district has to go through that RT-130 safety class. As a part of that, you do a fire shelter deployment. Now, they're training shelters, which we fold up and put, they're a little different, but it does simulate what they might have to do. So we want to make sure that they're comfortable on the procedure to deploy that in an emergency. So, but these are in plastic, they're in cases, you protect them, you keep them ready to go, and then there's you unzip, pull the thing out, it deploys really quickly.
Looks like a life raft.
Yep, you hang on to it so the wind doesn't blow it away, and then you get that thing over you, and you look like you're a baked potato with tinfoil on you for a while.
But that definitely keeps the smoke out and whatnot, right?
Well, I don't know, it reflects heat.
Oh.
So if the fire isn't directly down on you, and you've been able to clear an area, or you have a safety zone area, we've noted that it's been effective in the past to save a firefighter from a significant injury or death. If you're too close or in the fire, obviously there could be conditions that wouldn't work, but it's an incredible safety tool that we've adopted over the years that's, we've had some positive outcome. Obviously, we don't want firefighters to be overrun with fire. We want to train, we want to teach good tactics, but this is just another survival opportunity for that firefighter if we get boxed in a corner. So, really neat piece of equipment. I don't know, maybe Chief Paul knows who invented it, but wow, it saved some firefighter lives over the time. Name?
No, did have one once.
Yeah, he's had to be in one once, so.
I'm thankful for whoever he was, though.
That it? Well, thank you, Chief. I agree with you 100%. The amount of work that appears to have gone into this because of the quality of this document is, I've seen, this is the sixth one I've seen, and this is, although all the others are excellent, this one's outstanding.
Will the district, post this in one of their posts, a link to it for the general public that we could pick up and share that post? Because it's pretty darn impressive, especially when people see, like, the map of the district and they realize how big of an area the responsibility is.
Yeah, we will post it on our website. We can do a social media post that has a link. We'll work that out so people, as they read our social media, can go to it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that suggestion.
So again, thank you very much, and thank the staff and the all the members for all the hard work, and you guys all put out a great product here, so thank you. Okay.
I have a comment.
Did you have a comment, Gene?
Yeah, and we're going back to the fire shelters. There's little we can do when heavy, but it just seems odd to me. I've been doing this a lot of years, and practiced a lot, but never had to, like you, Chief Coyle, to actually deploy it in those conditions. We can put a man on the moon. We can, our technology is set that we can fly Mach 5, Mach 6, all sorts of technology, but we really haven't addressed the fire shelter over the years in any significant way. Are you aware of any, inroads to make improvements on deployment, or not deployment, of an alternative to fire shelters?
I do know that the well, it's not called, it used to be called MTDC, the Missoula Technology Development Center, I forgot what their new name is. But that after the Arnell Hills fire, that they had, kind of done their own version of an RFP to solicit interest for different products. And some of the ones that were the most promising as far as their, ability to protect the occupant also weighed a lot more than our current ones, and so, you know, there's a trade-off with mobility when it comes to that. So if you're more mobile, you're able to escape that environment and potentially not deploy. And of course, if you're less mobile, but you have a better product, it may prevent you from suffering a bad outcome in a wider variety of situations. But I do not know, you know, what they've landed on. I do know that there's work being done right now to address the second. We do have a second generation, so the shelters you guys had, ours weigh about twice as much or about twice as big. But they are working on, well, I guess would be the third generation of fire shelters, but I don't know where that is. I can see if I can find out.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chief.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Chief. I think the next item on the agenda is the strategic plan.
Yes, sir, it is. So, we'll, we want to, give the board an update, the public an update. We've, spent, as staff, I thought it was about a year. I think one of my staff members corrected me, it's been a little longer than that. But, you know, as a fire chief, when you come into an organization, one of the things you assess is, what's the plan, right? That's always a good question. What's our strategic plan, our long-term plan? And so I did that, we looked at it, and I got a lot of really good input from staff saying, you know, I think we need to reevaluate some of these, maybe condense, maybe think about functionality a little bit, and go for an update. So of course, I embrace that. You know, when you work with very intelligent staff and leadership, and they do a great job, you kind of listen when you get input like that. So we started that process, kept the same format that had been worked out before and developed before. You can see here in our strategic plan, when we talk about goal, strategy, and action items, those are the three main components. So a goal here we've stated, or a desired end state. So that really, the goal is more, you know, the 30,000-foot view, we'll say, the desired end state. And I believe we had 19 or 20 goals on the plan, and we've condensed those down to 9 goals. A couple of the goals now currently, you'll see maybe like a combination of thoughts from, you know, several goals from the last plan as we updated. So those goals, that desired end state, 30,000-foot view. Strategies are more the methods of obtaining the goal. Okay, so we have our 30,000-foot goal, and then we develop at least a couple strategies under each goal to get, or strategies, under each goal to get to that goal. So I would say the strategies are more like the, I don't know, the 6,000 to 10,000-foot view. When you're low enough, you can start to see some detail. So we go then to the third layer, the action items. Those are activities performed to implement the strategies. So really, that's now on the ground. That's the detail on how we're going to accomplish those strategies, because those strategies are going to lead us to accomplishing that goal. And, you know, this plan, as it has been in the past, as the district has adopted it and worked through it, and currently it is, it's a very dynamic process. We have to have a roadmap, we have to have goals, strategies, action items. But, you know, we're constantly looking at those and evaluating them. Like, for example, the action items, you'll see some of those as we go through the plan. Staff right now is developing tasks under each of those. See, now that's really, really minutia, right? Minutia. So, I'm gonna get this action done, because it's one of multiple actions to get to my strategy. So, well, what task would I do? Oh, first I have to get all the stakeholders in the room. I have to get the right people to the table. You You know, I have to develop an agenda. I have to, within that agenda, talk about, hey, what goal, our goals is a little work group to get this task done so we can accomplish the action that will get us to the strategy that will accomplish the goal. So, just to give you that big, broad overlook here on our strategic plan. So, any questions on that, kind of our perspective or the template for our approach?
Nope.
Excellent. So, let's, what I'd like to do is at least go through the first two or three. You know, I'm hoping that the board, looks at them, and, again, we're always open to questions on them, or, and if you have a question further in, I don't know that we'll go through every single line, unless there's unless you'd like me to, I certainly have no problem with that, but kind of to get the feel on the plan and how it flows, and kind of how we're approaching it. So, for example, goal number 1, it says, create and maintain a mission-focused culture with an emphasis on health and wellness to reduce injuries and other negative impacts. So let me read goal number 1 again. This is a mission-critical goal. It is specific to the employees of the SFT. It says, create and maintain a mission-focused culture with an emphasis on health and wellness to reduce injuries and other negative impacts. All right, so remember, we're at that 30,000-foot view. This is a great goal. This is mission-centric. That's what we do. We're going to go save lives, save property, keep the environment healthy. So we identified a couple strategies under that goal. Well, the one strategy is we want to empower employees to promote and provide safe, friendly, dedicated service. Anyone heard that before? Safe, friendly, dedicated service? Of course, that's our mission. So we locked into that mission. Safe, friendly, dedicated. That's our strategy to get to goal number 1. So under that, we've identified several significant actions. So, first action we have under our strategy is align procurement practices with industry best practices and relevant standards regarding apparatus, equipment, and PPE. So there's 3 areas there: apparatus, equipment, PPE. And that action is to look at industry best practice and relevant standards. Big standard for the fire service is the National Fire Protection Association, right? We just had a brief discussion on PPEs relevant to fire shelters. So we had a good discussion, good briefing. Well, you know, where do you buy a fire shelter and what standards is it built to? And what should we give our firefighters to carry on their web gear if they needed to go in a fire shelter? Goes back to the NFPA standards, industry best practices. Certain manufacturers get that certification to do that. That's who we're going to engage. We're going to go for the shelters that are approved, that are qualified, that are with industry best practices and standards. And then all that training is going to align with that. The next action item here under our strategy we just iterated is align our deployment practices with industry best practices and relevant standards. So the first one, action, we dealt with procurement practices, right? Now we're aligning deployment practices, and again, all related to apparatus, equipment, PPE. A good example for deployment practices with apparatus are these 2 new UTVs that we've ordered. Well, we changed a couple things from our other UTVs, and one is, you know, I hate to say it, but we got more power in these ones. And we got more capacity and more load. Well, why? Well, because when you put all the equipment on that vehicle, and you load it with 3 or 4 firefighters, and then you put a patient and a basket on that vehicle, we take these things to max load. And we're not talking about cement and pavement and flat road. We're talking about out in the dirt, you know, out in the rocks, you know, areas where that's why we're taking that vehicle. So we look at that deployment practice. We need the 2 new ATVs. We're going to build them to industry best practices and relevant standards. And sometimes when you have something specific like that, we might even set the standard and industry best practice, where other agencies contact us and say, how you outfitted that? You know, I was hiking, and I work in Montana for this agency that does a lot of the same stuff. Wow, can I get the specification for that? There's a lot of that kind of thing that goes on in the fire service. So the last action here we'll highlight on this strategy is revitalize the safety team to identify the barriers that limit our ability to rapidly identify and correct unsafe acts or conditions. So, we've had a safety team in the past, we don't have an active one now. What is that? Comprised of different members, different ranks, teams that can look at incidents, can look at our deployments, can look at how we're functioning, and do some analysis so that we can make some informed decisions on what we need to improve, whether it's policy procedure, whether it's apparatus, whether it's PPEs, whether it's equipment, whatever we need. So, that's a good action again. So, we started with goal number 1 at that 30,000-foot level, very mission-centric goal. The first strategy under that goal, we're really looking at the employees, how to empower them so they can be safe, friendly, dedicated. And then there's several action items here really dealing with the apparatus, equipment, PPE. Okay, questions on that so far? Excellent. So there's a second strategy we identified under goal number 1, and it's to promote employee health and wellness by providing a comprehensive means for achieving high levels of overall health that enables maintaining their physical work capacity, meeting work requirements, and improving the level of service to our citizens. So this strategy to get to goal number 1, again, it focuses on our employee and it focuses on their health and wellness. Here's one thing we found over the years in the fire service too. When you ask firefighters to do things, sometimes very dangerous things, to put yourself out there to protect the public, whether it's rescue, whether it's wildland firefighting, whether it's structure firefighting, whether it's hanging under a helicopter with a badly injured patient that we need to get to a trauma center. We've noted that if you give them the correct training, correct apparatus equipment, the correct PPEs, then you account for that mental health and wellness. In other words, they're ready to go. They're good to go. They don't have worries about where they stand in the organization or confusion about the mission. We've assisted and supported so they're not worried about their home unit, what's going on at home. We've helped them deal with that if there's an issue. We've noted that the outcome becomes incredible service. So it's really kind of makes sense, right? If taking an athletic analogy and you take care of that athlete and you get them in prime shape and get them everything you need, when they go out to the track and field or the football game or play baseball, they're going to function at the highest level they can. So this strategy really, to accomplish that first goal, aligns with that. A couple of actions under the strategy are a creative process for seeking modern equipment relating to functional movement design for firefighter fitness based on job requirements and demands with consistency at all facilities. So each of our fire stations, we have a gym, and we try to buy equipment that's functional, that helps them prepare for their job. And we try to be consistent with that equipment, and we have a team that looks at that and makes sure that it's current and up to date. The next action under this strategy is implement a process to provide Sedona Fire District employees with readily accessible guidance and equipment to maintain a healthy career while increasing knowledge surrounding wellness benefits. So I think the better job we do with these actions to support that strategy, we're creating a culture and we're creating a firefighter that's mission-centric. And again, for those of us in the industry that have placed ourselves probably where a human being shouldn't be placed, to save a life, save property, to stabilize something so the environment wouldn't be damaged, maybe even damaged to a sense where you can't even fix that environment for many years. This kind of support, it really frees your mind in those moments to focus on your training, do what you gotta do, get the job done, and then you reflect later what you just did. So, any questions on that? Really was a briefing on goal 1 of this. Any questions on that? It's a good example, of our process on how, we've approached this. So any questions on that?
Chief, if I may, just a suggestion. There are 9 goals, correct? And so we have 8 remaining. And I think it would behoove us to review these with the understanding of how you explained 30,000 to 10,000 and all the action items. And I think it would behoove us as, when we meet with you on our monthly meeting individually, that we discuss these with you, especially those that we have questions, because we may have questions in different areas and understand other areas just fine. But I do want to recognize the amount of work and time that the committee put to get the original number of goals, reduce them down to what we have today, and then create that strategy and tactic to achieve the objectives and the goals. So I think if the board would like any input into that suggestion as far as continue on with the review in private with you. Any other comment on that?
In tandem with what you're saying, for me, this is a lot of new information, you know, about the process and the goals, and I probably would be much better at being a board member if I really sort of digested this, goal by goal, and I like what you're doing now here, where you took a goal and you're really diving into it. And if there were more opportunities for that, I think, rather than me trying to take in the entire strategic plan at one time, but understand step by step where you are and how you got there. I've been involved with other strategic plans, and this is much more digestible. Most of the time, they end up on a big spreadsheet, and it just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook to me.
Okay, super. Any other comments? Okay, I think we'll address it that way as we go through the month and you meet with us individually.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You know, I don't think the goal should be to go through the whole thing, although I wanted to give a good foundation of
Right.
thought and staff thought and how we approach it. And the last thing, just to finish it too, that I will say, and I will definitely address it one-on-ones. A particular goal might come up from time to time in a staff presentation, just highlighting maybe accomplishment. That was one of the big discussions, what I think, Al, you were just alluding to for my staff was, hey, look, we don't want a really nice looking report that we can print and it looks nice, but we want something that's functional. So we really checked ourselves a lot. A lot of the discussion, the action items are difficult because we're like, well, we gotta make decisions here, and we gotta accomplish these things, but it can't be just, it looks good on paper. Then you start trying to do it, it's like, this doesn't make sense. Who put this together? So functionality was a huge goal with this. So as you read it, keep that in the back of your mind. The goal isn't to look good as a district like the annual report made us look good, based by the performance of everyone, by the way. But the goal really, this is how do we function? And the functionality of this, I think it's very good. And I've shared with staff several times as we're finishing, I think this is rare. Where we went with this and being centric to functionality when it comes to a strategic plan, that's rare. Remember, 30,000 fire departments, we're all told industry practices is have a strategic plan, so a lot of us aspire for that, but very few achieve functional plans. So, this is a functional plan. Keep that in the back of your mind as you review, and please, engage any of the staff. There's a lot of intent in what's down here on paper, and we definitely want to provide that as needed.
Okay. Thank you again, Chief, for the review on that. Appreciate it. Last item on the agenda is the board member items, discussion, board members' fire district-related activities since our last board meeting. And I will start with Janet, if you'd like to discuss or bring about anything you did this past month.
No, I have an upcoming, one-on-one with Chief Troutman on, I don't even know, 23rd or something. So that will be coming up.
Okay. Okay.
My turn to pay bills here.
Okay, thank you. Al?
Well, you know, the Raphael fire, brought the reality of wildland or the forest around us to home, and I get a lot of texts from people, and of course I took the opportunity to find the right kind of post to carry on, not just fire district posts, but some that came in from other sources, because people wanted answers. They wanted to understand, and I had some friends that lived actually real close to you all. She was ready to pack and go home because from her deck she could see all the smoke, and the fire was 8 miles away. And so my biggest contribution was trying to be a link to resources that gave people facts, and I continue to do that whenever I can. And that's why this annual report really shows how complicated and extensive of an organization this is. People just think they see a fire engine going down the street, oh yeah, we do have a fire department, you know. So that's my main, is trying to stay linked through social media.
Thank you. Gene?
The annual report, you know how you can go on Facebook and you got something you're just dying to share with somebody, but there's no share. You comment, but there's no way to share it. Well, there's a lot of times I wish I could. Like Al and perhaps others, what have you, I get phone calls, what have you, and they'll see, especially down in lower Red Rock Loop area, when the Cornville thing was going, my phone was ringing. And fortunately, we had the latest information. Jackie and I were coming back from Cottonwood, heading back on the back route and what have you, and we saw the loom up. It was just minutes into it. And I said to her, well, take a look at the color of that smoke. That's brush. That's brush, what have you. It's kind of gray blue, so on, and it's not a lot. And then all of a sudden, bang, something started to get black. And it hit something heavy, and so on. So I was explaining that to her. We got up to the road, what have you, and couldn't go any farther. They stopped us, couldn't go home. So we had a hamburger, but our neighbors, they want to know, and they'll call us as board members. We don't always have the latest information. We just don't. Other than that, you're well protected. Resources are here. There is a plan, and so on and so forth. It's okay. But as just Al said, it's only 8 miles away. Well, 8 miles is nothing. Not in I don't mean to disparage you, but
yeah.
8 miles is nothing in a major fire, because it moves fast. So, but our friends and neighbors, they want to know, and I appreciate the postings that have occurred and so on and so forth to give us information to share with them.
And then the airport, presence of the airport and the ability to literally turn half of the field over to firefighting equipment from out of town. I mean, it was like a military base up there. I mean, that really demonstrates how all the pieces of the puzzle start coming together, and people get upset that we even have an airport until you have an incident like that, and then they're thrilled.
Thank you.
Since this was all brought up, yes, thank you for keeping us abreast of those fires, because I as well got phone calls from our neighbors. And thank you also for that, app that you gave us, because that really helped me, and I could tell them where to go also. So thank you for that.
And lastly, I did attend the Arizona Fire District Association Conference, got my statutory training, and you always pick something up while you're there. You just, one of them having to be the question I asked you today on carryover. So was able to add that, that point. Today we attended the memorial for Chief Ventura, so that was another very well done service. And earlier in the month, I had contacted you, Chief, to ask you how do you determine your trigger points? What are your trigger points when these brush fires are coming across for you to make some sort of decision to act on something for this community? And as a result of that, I heard this ready, set, go. But what really caught my eye is the amount of times it was used on social media when something was to happen, this area is now in the ready mode. This one's over here is in the go mode. This one's, just progressed from the ready to the set. So that's very helpful. And I think it's helpful to the community at large, and that's what it's aimed for. So, you know, keep up the good work. I think it was very relevant to what we had going on. It was huge. So, unless there is any other comments, with that said, thank you all for attending. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done this past month and all the documents. This meeting is adjourned.